Yeehaw, Larkin Rose here, and okay, I had to do a little video today. After 40 some years, the Georgia Guidestones are gone. Looks like somebody set up an explosive that blew up one of the uprights, and then I think a crew took the rest of it down. I don't even know who owns the property. It was there. Apparently in 1979, someone put it up, and it's been this mysterious thing that who put it there? Who owns it? And what does it mean? And yada, yada, yada. And there's a whole lot of conspiracies about this is like the New World Order telling us blah, blah, blah. Reading these things, it's like a 10-point, doesn't even count as a manifesto. It's too sort of simplified for that. I think it had the same thing in 8 different languages. Reading the things, I could actually imagine that like somebody with a little bit too much money would like secretly put these up because you thought this was like an awesome view of the future of the world. I don't necessarily think like the evil elite put it up as a whatever. So the origins, I don't really care. And now it's gone. I don't know who owned it. So like, I'm not in favor of vandalism, even if it's of something stupid. I don't know whose property it was on. But I do like symbolically sort of a screw you to the New World Order notions, even though who knows who actually put the things there and whether it was them. Symbolically, it's sort of cool to see people going, here's what you think of your stupid ideas. But I wanted to actually read the 10 items and talk about them because I hardly ever, you see one mentioned all the time, which is the first one. Most of them you don't see mentioned. And I think it's important for people to understand the rest because a lot of it sounds like, well, that's pretty cool. That sounds like a good idea. Because most people don't think specifically enough to even wonder, well, what exactly does this mean? Because a lot of it like sounds nice. So I'm just going to go through the 10 items quickly and cover them now that the thing's gone anyway. But it's not like there aren't 80 gazillion pictures of it and everything else. So I don't think it's a huge loss for humanity. Number 1, maintain humanity under 500 million people. Or doesn't say people, under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Now, as a lot of people rightfully point out, there's already well over 7 billion people on the planet. So to maintain it at 500 million kind of require killing 7 billion people. Or maybe just waiting around for 7 billion people to die without reproducing. But why won't they reproduce? Is it because they all choose not to for an entire generation? Or because there's some central policy? And that brings me to number 2. So the first one's already creepy. Like, how do you think you're going to get there? You can describe what you think is a utopia, but how do you get from where we are to 7 billion fewer people? It's kind of hard to describe a way to get from that to that without being a creepy psychopath. Number 2 is actually creepier to me, but only if people think out what it means. So here it is. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. So that's one line. It's not 2 different items. Guide reproduction wisely. Who's guiding it? Because wording it that way doesn't sound like people are deciding wisely whether to have kids and when to have kids and how many kids to have. That isn't guiding it, means somebody is telling you what to do. And, you know, you can say, well, guide is just sort of a suggestion or something, but really, the people who have these master plans rarely just want to suggest stuff. They want a centralized authority making it happen. China did a fine job of demonstrating what it looks like when you have a central organization guiding reproduction, with their one-child policy, which resulted in a bunch of babies being murdered, and it's just a heinous insanity. So the fact that they say guide reproduction immediately, well, who's doing this guiding? But the second part is actually more telling. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. How does that result from guiding reproduction wisely? Well, if you're a eugenicist, as a lot of people were before the Nazis kind of spoiled it by showing how insane and evil it actually is, you would say, well, just let the healthy people have babies, because then we'll improve fitness. It's, straight out of the Nazi handbook is, deformed people and people who we don't really like and people who aren't perfect and they're sick or, whatever. You don't get to have babies. Or mentally unstable, you have problems, you don't get to reproduce. We, the state, will decide who can reproduce, because then we'll make a more fit, robust gene pool, like race, whatever. So that second line is pretty damn creepy. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. First of all, the diversity is like, how are you going to guide reproduction to have more diversity? That kind of sounds like you're telling people, oh, you're going to mate with them and you're going to mate with them, and maybe go screw yourself if you think that's something humanity should do. Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language. Okay, good luck with that. Like, not really going to happen. Sounds nice, unless you're trying to force it on everybody. And then you're an evil psycho. And if you're not trying to force it, you can just say nice things like that, and that's fine with me. I don't care, but it's not really going to happen. Number 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. And that sort of sounds like a good rule, except given the first 3, I don't nearly trust the people who are saying this. Okay, I don't trust whatever their version of tempered reason might be. But I'm all in favor of having people actually be rational. So if I could try to give them the benefit of the doubt on number 4. Number 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. First of all, what meaningless fluff? Is anybody against that? Is anybody saying, no, I want unfair laws and unjust courts? And yet, what do we always get in every nation from every government? Unfair laws and unjust courts. Well, gee whiz. So just saying, oh, protect people with fair laws, like fluffy, meaningless nothing, and it doesn't happen. By the way, I don't want to protect nations. Nations are the territorial jurisdiction of ruling classes. They shouldn't exist. If you mean places and peoples and traditions, and okay, that's fine. Voluntary, preserving voluntary forms of culture and how people get along, be my guest. But nations almost always refer to ruling classes and countries, so I don't want them protected. But the fluff about fair laws and just courts, and it's obviously speaking in the statist paradigm of we're going to have governments that'll make things good. No. Number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Again, this is just fluffy la land. And, I think a lot of pro-freedom people will be, this is the new world order conspiracy. I'm not sure I would chalk that line up to that. I just think this is somebody fluffy-headed who's like, well, each country can do its thing, but instead of having war, we'll go to a world court. Well, you already have that. You had it before. The UN's been around forever. War still happens. They're just sort of pretending, well, we'll have this level of ruling classes and then one big ruling class to make sure the lower ruling classes all get along together. First of all, every step of that is illegitimate. Every ruling class, big or small, national or global, is illegitimate. And second of all, the idea that a bunch of ruling classes, authoritarian, dominating psychos, are going to be nice to each other or their own people because there's an even bigger dominating authoritarian power over top of them. Read a history book. That's not how reality works. Number 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. Okay, that sounds nice. You're not ever going to do that as long as government exists, but you can write a line saying you want that. Okay, me too. I want that too. And pretty much all laws and officials are useless and petty. So do away with all ruling classes, but that's not what they want. Number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. No, Don't ever balance personal rights with anything. Personal rights are supreme. The rights of the individual are supreme. And the notion that you have to balance the rights of the individual with some collective social duties or common good or all the BS that's been used to justify the violent domination of the individual is insane. It's called collectivism. It's been the basis of all the most violent regimes in history, both fascist and communist, as if those are even different in practice. The Nazis were collectivists. The communists were collectivists. They all preached the notion that the individual, it's okay, it's necessary, it's good to sacrifice the rights of the individual for the collective, the country, the common good, the yada, yada, yada. So no. Personal rights means people not getting violated. So what they're saying is we need a balance between individuals not getting violated and individuals getting violated in the name of some greater good. Screw you. We don't need a balance of that. Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Okay. Okay. That line by itself, I would say, okay, that if you hadn't written all that crap beforehand, I'd say, okay, I can go for that. But all that crap beforehand shows that you're kind of demented. But okay, number 9, I won't complain about that. I'm sure I would disagree with whatever they meant, given who these people were. I don't know who they were, but you can tell something about who they were by the things they wrote before. But number 9, okay, I'll give that one a pass. Number 10, be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Again. Okay, cool, kinda. I'm all in favor of leaving room for nature. I think a lot about the way we do things is ugly and stupid and destructive and doesn't need to be that way. And I like nature. And I like leaving nature as it is. I think our big lawns are stupid. But I'm not going to violently impose my preferences onto other people. And this line doesn't say they're going to violently impose it on other people, but I don't really trust them not to, especially when they use the phrase a cancer on the earth. And the thing is, a lot of people I know can sort of view humanity as that, because we screw a bunch of things up. We mess up a bunch of things. We kill a bunch of things. We're kind of a disaster. In a lot of ways, and yet we're also the most advanced that any life form has been here, barring the supernatural creator of the universe or whatever. But as far as physical species on the planet, we are the most impressive by a lot. And there's a lot of people who don't like to think that way because they sort of like to be anti-human. And the fact that we have a level of intelligence that allows us to be destructive idiots is kind of frustrating. It's not actually unique. There are lots of species. There's lots of more primitive cultures that also screwed up their environments pretty badly because they didn't look ahead enough, and they were just like, let's use all this. What were the islands? Not Easter Island. Was it Easter Island? I don't know. Probably should have looked it up before I did this. Where the tribes who lived there gazillion years ago chopped down all the trees on the whole island. And if you chop down all the trees, you don't get any more trees. Sorry. Whoops. So people have done stupid things for a long time. And sometimes they do stupid, violent things on purpose. They're doing war, and they're, like the U.S. government slaughtered millions of buffalo so that the people living here, the indigenous people living here, wouldn't have them to get meat and hides from, which is insane. It's intentional mass destruction. And then we're also just sort of bumbling idiots who are often short-sighted and like, I'm not too fond of that. And yet at the same time, we are by far the most advanced, intelligent species of animal the world has ever known. And it also makes us capable of being really stupid and destructive. So be not a cancer on the earth. Again, if it wasn't in the context of the other stuff, I'd say, well, yeah, if we're that smart, maybe don't be just a disaster everywhere you go. And I'm not at all one who's against trade or ownership or capitalism or building stuff or progress or technology. And like a lot of people are like, oh, it's horrible that you harm, that you would ever cut down a tree, and then they go live in their house that's made of trees, like lots of trees that got cut down to make the lumber for that. And so a lot of people sort of have the luxury of being complete freaking hypocrites when it comes to this stuff, because they personally massively benefited from exploiting nature, and then they complain about exploiting nature. It's like, well, you're doing it too when you buy stuff that was made out of nature, which is in one way or another everything. But I do believe that there can and should be a balance. And now, lumber companies are like, well, now we reforest. We grow over here, and then we harvest over here, and we go back and forth and do it in a way that's actually manageable and sustainable. So there are non-stupid ways to do it without having to live like cavemen. If people want to live like cavemen, be my guest. I don't really want to, and people shouldn't have to. So that's the 10 items, but the main thing in there that stinks to me, other than the first two sound very eugenics, mass murdery, pretty obviously. But even throughout the rest, and the reason I did this video is because, anybody can go, it's bad to kill 7 billion people. Okay, that doesn't require a whole lot of insight to figure that out. Yeah, that's bad. But just the tone of so much of this is how authoritarian control freaks try to phrase the domination they want. We just want good things and a balance between this and this. And we want people to make good choices and blah, blah, blah. And what they really mean is we're going to decide all your choices and use violence to punish you if you disobey. And that is very much implied underneath the surface of a lot of these things, is that we're going to have a centralized authority that makes sure that we have all these lovely sounding things. And that's been tried. It was tried in the Soviet Union. It ended horribly. It was tried in communist Russia. It ended horribly. Whenever you try to have a master plan that's going to make everybody do the right thing and make good choices, and it's a catastrophe. And ironically, it's a catastrophe in all worse ways than what they were fighting against. Like, if you want to see an environmental catastrophe of just unmatched proportion, check out the Soviet Union. And if you want to see inequality and unfairness, check out the USSR, the People's Republic of China, North Korea, all these places that talked about, we're going to have a central plan that's going to help everybody and be all loving and caring, and we'll be in balance with this, and it'll be fairness and love and rainbows and bunnies, and look at all the dead people. That didn't work out too well. So the thing that stinks to me from the Georgia Guidestones, which are now rubble, isn't even the things they actually said, most of it. Except for the really obviously creepy ones. The underlying implication in all this, which you can see in any Democrat speech, you can see in any Republican speech, you can see in any politician speech, is they will talk about the fluffy goodness that's their goal, and they'll sort of skip over the violent domination that's the way they intend to get to the fluffy goodness. And guess what? It doesn't actually get to the fluffy goodness. It just gets to more domination and suffering and injustice and all sorts of nastiness. But I thought it was worth mentioning because other than the obvious psychotic things on the Georgia Guidestones, may they rest in a pile of rubble, just the underlying tone in so many of these things that sound nice on the surface, people need to ask themselves, well, how do you get there? And really the road from being a statist to a voluntarist, a lot of that comes from people saying, okay, that sounds nice, but how do you get there? We want everyone taken care of, say the socialists. Okay, me too. That sounds nice, but how do you get there? Oh, by government violently robbing everybody and deciding what you're allowed to have. Oh, well, yeah, it doesn't sound so good when you put it that way. If you just talk about the fluffy supposed goal, it sounds great. When you mention the authoritarian violence in between, which is all government ever does, doesn't sound so great. And it's the same thing on the other side. Well, we want the innocent protected, and we want values upheld, and we want strong economy, and we want to be protected from nasty people here and nasty people in other countries, thus say the conservatives. Well, that's awesome. How are you going to get there? By violently robbing everybody to fund a gigantic standing army that's then going to go around the world starting conflicts to enrich corporations and politicians. Oh, well, now it doesn't sound so good. So the Georgia Guidestones is a perfect example of how when you listen to somebody's goals and their intentions when it comes to political philosophy, you kind of got to back it up and say, how do you get there? What is the mechanism by which you get to this happy utopia you're describing? Because this describes a nice happy utopia, most of it. How do you get there? And if the person believes in government, the answer is always, without fail, without exception, ever, anywhere on the political spectrum, the answer is always, we get there by way of government violence. And that's why a government/political solution is never the solution, and it's never the way to get humanity and the earth to where it should be.